Well, thank you everyone for joining our Breakthrough Labs Entrepreneur Chat and Question and Answer session today. We are really lucky to have with us Riham Satti, who is the CEO and co-founder of MeVitae. And I'm dying to hear about Riham's journey because she does not have maybe a traditional entrepreneur journey, especially not for the kind of company that she's created. And so it's great to hear about founders, I think, with non-traditional journeys. Although what is a traditional journey, frankly, these days? So Riham, I'm not gonna do much of a preamble here. I'm just gonna start right away and ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your company and what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi all. Lovely to meet you, and hopefully you find this session insightful, and yeah, ask as many questions from any sector possible. So just a quick brief about what we do. So I'm one of the co-founders of a company called MeVitae, and our aim at MeVitae is to use technology to mitigate biases. When I mean biases, I mean cognitive as well as algorithmic biases, so that organizations, mostly enterprise, can make smarter, faster, fairer hiring decisions, really. And our solutions run within existing HR systems, and that's with a kind of a strategy decision that we made. And it's been proven to actually increase diversity metrics in organizations by up to 40% or so. And that's a kind of a minimum. And yeah, our aim really is to kind of try and create fairness in the workplace.
Can you tell me actually how it works? Because I don't know how.
Yes, let me tell you how it works. So we offer a suite of tools that tackle different areas of the hiring process. The flagship solution that we're mostly known for is blind recruiting or anonymized recruiting. Some people even call it neutral recruiting. And what that means is when an organization hooks up MeVitae to their HR systems, so it runs within those, when an applicant applies to a role, they normally get screened by a recruiter or a hiring manager to determine whether that candidate is suitable. However, when you look at those resumes or cover letters, a lot of biases can creep up based on someone's name or university they've gone to. And so what the system does is it redacts any information that could potentially lead to biases. So a recruiter or a hiring manager is looking at this redacted form of documentation, and therefore focusing more on the skills and the competencies. And once a hiring manager or recruiter has made a decision based on this redacted information, and they've booked their interviews, let's say, only then do they get to see the real information. And so that what we're doing is therefore trying to mitigate those biases, because most of them take place the first time a recruiter or a hiring manager, an employer first sees some sort of application.
Oh yeah, it's that weed out process.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the same kind of candidates just never make it to the top.
No, absolutely. And the whole way the recruitment market is based out, it's a way to screen people out rather than screen them in. Yeah. And as a result of that, you end up missing on lots of talent or potential. Therefore, if we can, and biases is a neurological thing, right? Everyone has biases, and therefore current approaches to try and tackling them, such as unconscious bias training, is a great way as a conversational opener, but it doesn't actually lead to mitigating those biases. So what we need to do is try and actually use technology as another form of approach to mitigate them, really prevent.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me then about your background, Riham. I mean, you mentioned neurology a little bit right there. So tell me about your background, how what your career journey was to get to MeVitae, and what the connection is.
Yes, no, absolutely. So let me start off with a bold statement, which is I did not want to be an entrepreneur at all. I had no interest in that whatsoever, or a businesswoman at all. The career trajectory I was taking was I first went to Imperial to do medical engineering, and then I was doing my PhD at Oxford in neuroscience. So my path was complete that PhD, do a postdoc, become a lecturer, professor, literally straight down the academic route. No other path was in my mind at all. And definitely business was on the bottom of that list. I was like, that I did not want to do that at all. And just purely because I never even thought about it, to be honest. I thought I'd be good at it. And a lot of my family members come from this academic background, and so this is quite a very, very normal to me. However, it only kind of started to change while I was at Oxford. I met my co-founder, Vivek. So he's the CTO, he's a computer scientist by background. He wanted to get a job at a big tech firm. And I said to him, there's no point you just submitting your CV because it's a competitive space. Why don't you try doing something else to try and grab the attention of recruiters or hiring managers rather than going down the traditional route? So we spent about a couple of days. We built this app of Vivek CV, and we put it up on the Windows Store. That should give you a hint, everyone, around which tech company that was. So we put it on the Windows Store, and the app got rejected initially. Microsoft was getting it doesn't qualify. You know, why do we need to see Vivek CV on the Windows Store? So then we opened it up for other people to put their CVs. It was like a CV in your pocket situation. And this was before, I guess like LinkedIn at that time was climbing. And within a couple of weeks, we had about 50,000 downloads of that app. It was climbing 100 every single day. It was growing exponentially, ranked the top Windows Store app. I had no idea. I was doing my research, didn't even notice until I got a message from someone from Microsoft saying, let's come in. We want to have a chat. I'm like, okay, but like, can I do the stuff I need to do first before I come over? But yeah, we ended up going to the office. The headquarters is in Reading. And we had a chat around, you know, what the system does, what the solution does, how do we do it, what was the approach. It makes entire sense why Microsoft brought LinkedIn now. It makes complete sense. And that's when I got the first glimpse of entrepreneurship, really. And we started looking at the recruitment market and realized just how fragmented, unfair, and just it really is. And like I said, it screens people out as opposed to in. And you know, like I said, it's a neurological challenge as opposed to an industry challenge as well. And so that's when we set out kind of our mission to try and mitigate these biases. And yeah, it all came about trying to get a friend a job. So I've done the first task, which is getting him a job. So he's now the co-founder and CTO of MeVitae. So now we're on to the second job, which is how do you create fairness in the workplace?
I love that story. It's so interesting because I worked at Microsoft for 14 years and I always tell stories about their hiring process, especially in Redmond at the headquarters, because it was really, really brutal. And, you know, the way we were taught to hire people every time, you know, a candidate had interviews from 8:30 in the morning until 5:30 in the evening, if they made it that far, but they didn't know how long they were going to be interviewing until the next person told them you can move on to the next interview. And when you would go to the next interview, the person whose, you know, office you were entering had already seen all the feedback on your previous interview and knew where you had done well and poorly and what they had to focus on. And it was just brutal. So I hope they have taken some changes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's quite common. It's not even just Microsoft. It's, you know, lots of organizations, processes, you know, it's so convoluted and you've got different stakeholders, right? You've got candidates, you've got agencies, you've got the organization itself, and within that you've got sub-departments. It's lots of personalities, lots of styles, different approaches, and obviously every process has biases in it, but if we can try and mitigate it and make sure or prevent these biases, then actually you could find some great talent that you never considered before, right? So everyone deserves a chance one way or another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you find, I mean, we talked about how this conversation was going to go ahead of time, but this kind of leads into a later question that we talked about, which is how did you find your first customers and clients?
I could spend hours just talking about that one. A lot of hard work. So I don't have an MBA or any of this. I've learned just by doing and just having actually a lot of support from mentors along the way. Now, initially when we started off, we kind of built a very basic MVP. technically they tell you to go speak to your prospective clients, your end users, and then build a product around that. We did the opposite. We just built a product. They're like, here you go, do you want it? Initially, it was a lot of networking. So we knew we needed to sell to HR directors or VPs of talent acquisitions, right? And we were B2B. Specifically, we wanted to go enterprise. And now a lot of enterprise organizations never want to be the first client. They're right. They don't want to be the guinea pig, but it becomes a domino effect once you've got your first couple of clients, really. And initially, what we were doing was a lot of trial and error and networking. We one of our first clients that we brought on board was an enterprise organization, like several tens of thousands employee size, and they were looking for solutions around DE&I, and they had a very specific product that they wanted, which happened to actually be blind recruiting or anonymized recruiting. And we next gave them a demo of the product, and then they said, you know, how much does it cost? And I was like, I have no idea what the pricing structure for this looks like. No idea at all. I just literally had to just figure it out. I looked at competitors. I asked some of our mentors. I was like, how do you price this? We muddled along, but it was like, you know, we need a pilot. We have to do a pilot. And I think a lot of enterprise organizations, if they feel uncertain or they feel like you're the first, they'll say they want to do a pilot. So we were like, okay, we'll do a pilot. And it wasn't a paid pilot. It was completely free. And once we did the pilot, we made sure that we can test certain metrics to success. So, and if we hit those benchmarks, then they had to buy the product. There's no debating on that one. So we set those criteria early on with the stakeholders of the organization. That sales cycle, by the way, took like 2 years. It was very long because, yeah, long story, but it was a long sales cycle. We did the pilot. Then after the pilot, they're like, they compared us to other solutions as well. But they found out that MeVitae, they felt was more superior. So then we had to go through procurement processes. Never done that before. Procurement, an enterprise organization, painful. Cyber security questionnaires, ISO standards, the risk assessment surveys they send you. No experience in any of those, but we kind of had to muddle along, and I had a great tech team who could actually help in answering a lot of those questions. And then we had to negotiate contracts. Again, I ain't a lawyer. I literally got a legal consultant to help us negotiate the terms of the contract, going back and forth. That took months alone. So even after they said yes, it took like another year to go through all of that stuff, really.
Oh my God.
That was the first client. And once we got the first, then we got a case study. We made them like do announcements and stuff like that on there. So then we used that to kind of get the others on board. The other thing that we had is, because our systems run inside ATSs or HR systems, what we did alongside that was partner up with other ATSs or HR systems. So what they did was they became a bit of an extension of our sales team. So they would introduce us to a lot of leads, really. So we don't have a huge sales team because the HR partners are a bit like our sales team. They drive we get inbound traffic that way.
Right.
And when you have partners recommending you, it doesn't go from it goes from a cold lead to a warmer lead. And so and then we had case studies, we had evidence that we could use to then get the other clients, really. So yeah, it was tricky.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Christina on the call just asked a question, which Christina read my mind was going to be my next question. So that takes such a long process. How did you sustain yourself for the first few years? So how did you raise funds? And I know you and I've had this conversation where you said your fundraising process was a bit almost like your sales process, because it's like an egg where the first customer wants to know what other customers have done, and it's, same with the investment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a chicken and egg scenario. The investors wanted use cases and they wanted evidence of revenue, and then we didn't have any. And then the clients, you need enough revenue to be able to handle it. It became a chicken and egg scenario very, very quickly. Now, a lot of it, I guess, there's lots of investors that do pre-seed, seed rate, and all of those stuff. our approach was to go down the grants route. We did grants. We acquired probably about 400K worth of grant funding, just to sustain ourselves, really. And a lot of people don't go down the grants route. So a lot of people, when you see a lot of investment charts, they say friends and family. I'm like, I don't have millionaire friends and family that I can go to and just go, can I borrow 100K from you? No, it doesn't work like that. So for us, we looked at things like Innovate UK, we looked at ESA, that we looked at regional growth funds, councils, and we submitted bids and applications to get grants through those. And those grants are normally like a year long, and you get the funding in tranches as well, which is quite nice. So that was our mechanism to sustain ourselves until we had enough traction to get the clients, and actually it helped us during that pilot phase as well. So, and we were bootstrapping like crazy. We didn't really, have a huge team. We had like internship programs, which also were like funded as well. So we didn't have to pay the interns were paid through the programs. So there's things like there was Spin, for example, for physicists. So we had that happening. We had the grants, like I said, but yeah, a lot of it was just hard graft. And regarding the question, was I academically involved? No, I left. I literally left academia and just went straight into this with literally no revenue, nothing. I just jumped off that cliff really and tried to figure it out as I went along. And yeah, we took the grants route. We got to the point where it was so tight, and I was saying, if I do not get this grant application, that's it, I'm done. Right? I don't know how we're gonna have to get a job, really. And so it was very tight and nerve-wracking, but wouldn't have changed it for the world, to be honest. So, and after we got the first grant, once you've got one, it becomes, the writing style, right? And it helps to be able to kind of go to the next and to the next. And we use that to sustain ourselves while we had the pilots and whilst we got the clients. And then only after that, then we did investment rounds. So I'd raise, because otherwise investors will take huge equity off you. And they'll say, come back when you're ready, or come back when you've got more clients, and they'll spend a lot of time talking to you, but you won't necessarily get the checks that you need, really, or the term sheets won't be very favorable. So that was our approach.
Yeah. I mean, you eventually did pitch for investment.
Yes.
So can you tell me a bit about, do you have any positive or stories or negative stories, or do you, what do you wish you had known ahead of time that would be other founders?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned, again, you've probably learned a lot of this. I've learned just by doing, really, no book or anything. I learned so much about the investment process. I didn't know what I was going into, to be honest. They tell you to plan that your first investment round could take between 6 months to a year. Plan for that, because that is actually realistic, especially for the first one. Treat the investment round like a sales process, really. What we did is we joined a few incubators and accelerators, which is also another way that we sustained ourselves, really. That was a good approach, because you get some access, you do like pitching days and stuff like that. So it gave us contacts into like investors that we didn't have before. So the first thing we did was we created a pitch deck. And it was, if I showed you the first pitch deck we created, it was the most ugliest thing ever. I was so embarrassed looking at it now. But we created and do that as fast as possible. Use a lean approach, because the first pitch deck will never be perfect. You'll iterate and learn as you talk to investors. So we created the pitch deck, and then I reached out to some of my contacts that I knew and said, do you know any investors that we could speak to? So I went down the introduction routes. Because no investors like to be, pitched just cold, right? So I went down the introduction route, and I spoke to so many investors, like hundreds. I had an Excel spreadsheet with every investor that I kind of like, who is the ideal investors we want to go for? right? Where are they based? What their specialty? How much they raise? Just build it as an Excel spreadsheet. And I would just go down that list. Do I know anyone that can connect me? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Anyone that was a yes, I tried to get an introduction. Or if I knew they were having pitching or demo days and stuff like that, I'd make my way there. That took months just to even just start having conversations with these investors. Then we had to do the next problem is lead investor. Who becomes your lead? Investors are, no one wants to lead, and everyone, they're like, when you get a lead, come to me. And it's like, no, I need you to lead. So it also becomes a chicken and egg scenario. And so what we ended up doing was collecting a lot of investors who were like, yes, we'd like to invest, get a lead. Yes, we'd like to invest, get a lead. And so we ended up accumulating, I think it was like 250 initially of just those kind of conversations. And then we met SFC Capital, which were our first lead investor for our first investment round, which was about $500,000 that we did. And they did the due diligence on us. So there was, make sure you have a data room and set it up before you speak to investors. In that data room, you should have your shareholder agreements, you should have your financial plans, you should have your pitch deck, any clients that you have, every evidence that you might think you'll need to back up your pitch deck, have that in that data room. Because what happens a lot of the time, and I've learned that from other startups, is they'll send the decks and then the investors will be like, send me the data room, and then the startups are vanishing for like a month. It doesn't look good at all. So if you have that ready and planned for, then you can just share it. And we had it as like a data room where we'd share a link and then they would review everything. After that, we ended up having lots of investors. We had institutions, we had seed investors, we had angels, and then we had multiple term sheets. There was not one in our case. Normally there's just one, but ours, and we had to get our lawyer to try and there was a lot of negotiating to condense all the term sheets into one, and we had to circulate that so many times so everyone agreed on the same terms. That wasn't even doing the shareholder agreements, that was just the term sheets. Then we got to the negotiators, the shareholder agreements, the articles of associations. We circulated on those for, again, months. By that time, it got to Christmas. So we started raising April, May. It was Christmas, and we still haven't signed. We signed the term sheets, but not the shareholder agreements and articles. And then everyone went on holiday, and it felt like you had to restart again. So we ended up closing it just before April, really, that round. It was a very long process.
And is that, so this came up on a call we had with our Breakthrough Labs female founders yesterday. One of the founders wanted to know this. And so, you start the round in April, it takes forever to find, it takes months and months to find investors who are interested. Then it takes months and months to negotiate. Then once you finally closed it, does the money just drop into your account at that point?
So you have to do it in a specific order though. Okay. So the shareholder agreements and the articles and all the paperwork must be signed before any transfer of payment can be made. If you are going down the SEIS, EIS route, then you have to make sure that you have those assurances before you do the round, because otherwise they're like, I need evidence that you've got EIS, SEIS. Right. Once all of those are signed, then the payment of transfer can happen. But I kid you not, once we did all the contracts and stuff like that, and the payment came in, like it was like probably 2-3 days, the payment came in after. I was just dead. I just sat there going, and then you're just meant to, now you've got money, now you have to go hire people. If you do raise, great, make sure you take a break in between, just to pace it off, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, this one. And once you do the first, you will learn so much, and you can do the next and the next and the next. It becomes easier as well. Right. That's encouraging, at least once you've done that. That's really good. But yeah, you have to plan then, really quite far in advance, as you say, to make sure. So raise only if you have to. And a lot of people say this, but honestly, only if you need to. And if you are going to raise, and this is your first round, plan for 12 months. Just even though it might take you 2 weeks, great. But just plan for 12 months, just so that you're mentally prepared for it. Yeah. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your team now? So
I know that I have a couple questions on this. I know that you've always had a co-founder.
Yes.
How do the two of you work together, and how do you split up what you do?
Yeah, interesting. So we both had technical backgrounds when we started off. We couldn't both be CTOs, and I was absolutely fine with that. I was okay. And the only way we could divide it was one had to be the CTO and the other had to be the CEO. And I was a very introverted person. You'd never believe it. But when we started off, I was. And so I had to kind of become more extroverted to kind of adapt and adjust for that. So by nature, he took CTO, I took CEO. Anything technical, the product development, the roadmap, the features, the infrastructure, the security, all of that fell to Vivek. Or that meant everything else fell to me. So I was the HR, I was the legal, I was the salesperson, I was the marketing person, I was all of that until we hired a team, really. And there's a lot to all of those different things. But we just had to prioritize a lot in terms of what is the most important thing. And at that time was getting clients. That was the priority. So building the sales deck was the priority. Networking and talking to prospects was a priority, going to events. And the way I used to do it before COVID was give a lot of talks around different topics. So HR, we found out what our USP was. And the USP is that we could leverage the neuroscience background that I had to actually help with kind of the D&I space. So I'd asked to give a lot of talks in that space, and that meant we could build a lot of relationships with HR leaders. So yeah, we were like that for maybe a year or two. And then we had a few interns in between. And then we had our third employee just before we raised our investment round. And then after the investment round, we started to hire more people in the team. The next hire we made, I was still doing sales, but we hired more tech people because we wanted to take the perspective of becoming more of a deep tech HR company as opposed to SaaS based. So Vivek, at the team was like 70% of it was tech, right? So we had software developers, algorithm developers, integration specialists, etc. It was only until we hit a critical mass where I couldn't do any more sales on my own, really, that we brought in. I was closing the deals, but the next immediate hire we did was customer success because I couldn't sustain getting leads and then managing the relationships with them. So then we hired customer success, and then we hired marketing as well. So because we were doing a lot of things with Google Ads and thought leadership content and stuff like that. So we hired marketing. So at the moment, the team is 12 going on 20 in the next month or so. So we're doing a lot of hiring at the moment.
Wow.
So yeah.
So I imagine you use your own product to help hire.
Yeah, we'd be hypocrites otherwise, wouldn't we?
Which is phenomenal, which is so cool. But what do you think about in terms of your own company culture?
So this is really interesting. I love our team, completely love our team. But there's always, and when I started telling you this as well, Kristen, was our board and our investors were saying, every time you raise or every time you scale, there should be a difference or a change in the organization with the culture or how you do things. And so fairness was at the foundation of the culture, and innovation was at the foundation of it. And I guess by nature, having an organization in the D&I space, you have people that are very passionate about this, who care about this sector. So it was easy to build a culture on the back of that. It's the other things that are trickier to hire for, right? Standards, accuracy, go-getterness, all of those things are harder to kind of measure or track, right, in the team. And we had to have like a robust, I guess, hiring process, but I also took the guidance of our board to help on that as well. So at the moment, we have a very detailed culture handbook that we have, and we use that when our hiring as well, right? Making sure that people who are joining us actually have that same ethos and value. But one thing we started doing recently is every team member now has to tell us what their values are and what are their pet peeves. right? What bugs them? Because it makes life a lot easier if we know what bugs people. It just makes us more efficient. And so we've kind of done that. And we do like quarterly check-ins with the team, and they tell us what are the things that they would like more help on, and what are the things that we can do as an organization to improve as well. So because it just means that dialogue, and we're welcome like any improvement techniques or things that we should be doing to help an organization. That's really important to us. And that's kind of, to us, the culture comes from the core team, right? If you've got to have that kind of, you have to lead by example, right? And one of the things that we learned, our team said, we'd like more training on confidence and leadership style. So we had someone come in to give the talks dedicated to that. And we do a lot of, everyone's working remotely at the moment, but we meet up every quarter, and we're doing a retreat in about less than a month. So we do lots of activities together. So we've got this kind of like work hard, play hard mentality. And of course, I know it will shift and it will change over time, right? I'll be very naive if I didn't say that. But I'd hope that people believe in that culture, and they feel like it's a nice environment to work in. And we've got a really good actually review on Glassdoor. I think we're on 4.7 out of 5 or something like that in terms of reviews. So I think our culture is something that we're really, really proud of. And the team that we have is, probably our strength, to be honest.
That sounds amazing. I mean, our mutual friend Jeff Lloyd talked to our founders about the shadow that a leader casts, and that you have to make sure that everything that you're doing is aligned with the company culture as well, because you cast a big shadow.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I love that. So I have reached the end of my questions, but I know that I'm going to hope that there's people on this call that have some questions as well. So if you have a question for Riham, just feel free to just ask it either in the chat or unmute yourself, because we'd love to see you. I know there's a couple of our founders on here who I heard little bits when you were talking that resonated with both of their companies, honestly. So we'll have questions, but anybody have any questions? Oh, Christina put one in the chat.
How does the future look like, and how do you approach this for your company? Really good question, actually. During COVID, it was a bit quiet because we're a HR company, and there was a lot of hiring freezing and layoffs happening. So what I did is I brought the biggest whiteboard I can think of. I actually smashed the television using this whiteboard. But what I did is I built a 5-year plan. So and this is a lot of people, other founders tell you to do this, is build what you think your vision will be, all right, and work backwards from that. So build a 5-year plan. And that's what I did for people. Didn't even know where I was for about a month. I was just in the living room shielding for a while, got a whiteboard and built that vision. So everyone should know in our organization, our vision is that to create that fairness in the workplace. Our mission is mitigating those biases. And we have 3 pillars to achieve that. Understanding, right, which is talking about doing research in this space. We collaborate with a lot of universities. When we've got our interfaces are our solutions of how do we, what are the ways to tackle that bias? And then the last one is our measuring. How do you know these things work, right? And so everything we do falls under those 3 pillars. If they do not, then they do not become a priority. And we review that on a regular basis. And then we also got balanced scorecards. They're my favorite little thing now, balanced scorecards. So everyone in our team has targets, metrics, numbers that we measure. And our future really is how do we build a way that we can not just help mitigate these biases, but actually track them in organizations. So how do we make sure that organizations are responsible for HR and D&I approaches and initiatives they take, right? Because there isn't as much accountability in that space, right? And you don't want it to be a tick box exercise. So our future really is how do you instill that, right? And making sure that we scale our organizations. And we're at this stage at the moment where most of our clients are US based. So we're looking into, okay, how do we scale into the US? What is the process to do that? How do you get a team there? And everyone in our team have their own kind of priorities and responsibilities to try and achieve that, right? From a tech side, a marketing side, customer success, sales, etc. But it all aligns on those pillars, really. And that's kind of I'd recommend anyone who's kind of thinking about stuff like this get a whiteboard and just scribble everything down and then organize it after. But it's been a good way to kind of just formulate our ideas, and actually making sure you have a board who you can sit down with and go, okay, what do you think? Right. Make sure they all have different expertise, so then they don't end up kind of saying the same thing, and actually getting their feedback. Do you agree? Do you not agree? All of that stuff.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great, I love those kinds of exercises as well.
Oh, yes.
So Danielle has a question in the chat, and then we'll go to Rita, but Danielle says, did you ever feel like you were close to giving up besides
100%
grant come through? How did you
times? Why am I doing this to myself? Why did I not just like do another route? Like, why did I just do the yes? So many times I've thought about that. But when I was doing academia, I was specializing and focusing on one small thing, right? But in fact, my joy came from actually being a jack of all trade, master of none. I can talk crap about lots of different things and know nothing about them. So, and I realized that actually, you know, being an entrepreneur, you get to engage and talk to so many different people. And 100%, there's always going to be doubts, right? Am I doing the right thing? Have I taken the right approach? Right? Because every single decision leads to another decision, right? And you can get decision paralysis quite easily. So 100%, I've always, you know, I've had those sensations, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? And it's natural, all right? What I did, again, it comes down to whenever I felt like, am I going down the right path? We have our board meetings every quarter, and I sit down with our mentors, I sit down with our board members, our non-execs, like, you know, what do you think? Right? Am I going crazy? Is this the right path? And you can't always assume to be motivated yourself. It's like you need other people around you, and having, you know, the core team definitely get you out of those ruts for sure. But surrounding yourself to actually understand the frustration and the pain that you're going through, and having that support network. Yeah. Right. Just sometimes I've got other female founders that I speak to, I'm like, what am I doing? And they're just like, you're fine, you're okay. I'm like, okay, let's keep going. So of course you have those up, down days, but you know what? When you get those highs, it feels fantastic. So it's like a seesaw, really. But absolutely, I would never change this in a million years. It's been so much fun. And do you know what? I've learned more about running a company, about myself, than if I've taken any other route, I think. Yeah.
No, I'm sure you have. I need to listen to this again when I have a down day, frankly, because I do get it.
You can do it. Yeah. I used to even have like a screensaver on that. Whenever I logged in, it says like work hard. So it just got me into that mindset.
That's really good. So Rita, I'm going to go to your question, and then Christina put some questions in the chat.
Let me unmute myself. I thank you so much for your valuable insight. I have a question about you saying the chicken and egg with investors. You know, we are interested, but come to us when you have the leads. I'm hearing exactly the same. I was wondering, were there just conversation, or did you have anything in writing from those co-investors that didn't want to take the lead? How did you deal with that? Did you just keep the conversation going until you had a lead and went back to them? I don't know.
Yeah, no, actually, good question. What I did, that someone taught me this, and I'd recommend everyone else doing this as well, is every time I had a conversation, I would say to the investors, I'm creating a newsletter to keep you updated on our progress, right? And I'd be like, are you okay for me to like send it to you as a regular update? And yeah, of course, 100%, send the updates, right? And so then what I did is every month they'd get an update going, where are we on the investment round? What's our progress? What have you done? So I now built a network of about 100 investors that get this newsletter every single, I'll do it quarterly now because monthly was too much then, but they then know what the progress is. And then I would then, when I had that lead, go up to the investors and go, okay, we've got our lead investor. This is who they are, right? We're going to, and no investor likes to be lost, right? Once you've got a lead. And so you create a sense of urgency. We're going to close this round in like a month's time. You're either in or you're going to have to wait, all right? And so I would, and then I chase up with them and do that regularly. And then they'll jump on a call and meet up with you, right? And they'll be like, okay, tell me where you are. How much have you got? Is it SEIS? Yeah. Send me the cap table. Send me all of that stuff. And just keep them in the loop right? And they'll never want to feel like they've been left out, really. That's how, so definitely do a newsletter to keep them updated. And if you've got letters of like confirmations, keep those. They won't necessarily ask for them. They'll be just like, they'll just say to you, know, who else is involved and who else is taking place, and have they confirmed. That's as far as my conversations have gone to.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
That's perfect for you right now, Rita.
Monthly newsletter though, I was like, okay, a lot can happen in a month, but what if not much happens?
Something will happen. Even if you can't send them a major update, send them an article, right? Or something that's linked to what you do. There is always something that you can say, right? One way or another. And if you realize that 1 month is too much, make it 2 months. They won't even notice, to be honest. As long as they're getting regular updates and they've like, oh, actually, Rita's messaged me. It's just the fact that you're there, rather than other organizations who come and go, really.
Awesome.
No
I like
worries.
it. Thank you very much.
Great,
No worries.
great advice, Riham. So Christina has some questions about like your work as a founder and your personal life and disagreements with your
personal life. Honestly, what personal life? So I'm a workaholic, and I probably admit that. I don't, and I'm saying this to you, Kirsten, as well. I find it hard to switch off, right? I find it hard. It takes me a long time to switch off, really. I've slowly getting better at it. I think during COVID, I've improved, where I would just work 7 days a week, and I would not switch off. And friends would message me like, Riham, do you want to meet up and do this? And I'm like, I can't. And it wasn't until one of my friends was saying to me, Riham, you need to pace yourself now. You're right. And I think my board members were saying this as well. And then I started taking the weekends off, right? And I was like, oh, actually, I'm more productive doing that than just constantly working. And I think the more I did that, the better. And now one new thing I'm doing is a no meeting Fridays. I'm going to start implementing this in the team, right? That Fridays, no meetings. Because what happens is you end up with calls every day, right? 9 to 5 plus sometimes, and we've got calls in the US. And then I end up still with the same amount of work that I needed to do before. And so I end up having to try and catch up. And that's what it used to bleed into the weekends. And so I am trying to try this and see if that works, really. But I find it very hard to juggle, right? And it's some people say you could have it all. I don't know how realistic that is. You can have bits of it. And what we also notice in our organization, sometimes things are more chaotic and they all happen at the same time. And then it's quieter a bit. And then it compresses and it kind of goes out. And we had to the point where we had like an ISO audit, we're doing a fundraise, we're acquiring clients and hiring at the same time. And it was just intense. But then after that, it calmed down a bit. And so at those moments, I would kind of breathe a bit and relax and trying to recharge those batteries. But pacing yourself was absolutely important, really. And I guess also regarding your question about disagreements with co-founders, you'll always have disagreements, right? The problem is when you've got just 2 founders, you can always be 50-50 down the middle, right? What we did is we had our board, they were kind of like the sounding board for a lot of things. So if I said one thing and Vivek said another, then we'll go to the board meeting like, what do you guys think, right? Tell us, who do you think we should go with, right? And that's probably for major decisions like strategies and important key things. When it came to minor situations, right, someone has to I guess back down. I'm stubborn, I don't much, and neither does he. So what happens is when it comes down to, we had to kind of divide up the roles and responsibilities. If it was under his remit, right, if it was a tech thing, right, and I disagreed with it, then we'll do it his way and see if it doesn't work. We learn from it fast and we move, but we don't blame each other for it. So, and we just adapt and iterate on the back of that. And so that became a really good way for us to actually just work really well. And we've been working together for nearly 10 years on this organization. And we've learned a lot around, again, what our pet peeves are, right? What are our boundaries? What can you do? What can't you do, right? And just making sure you've got like open dialogue all the time, but dividing up those roles and responsibilities was really useful, to be honest. But you'll always have a disagreement. Just sometimes you just have to think they're not too deep to kind of fight so much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to have a disagreement. Like, you're going to have to, when I was just managing teams regularly, you want everyone to have clear roles and responsibilities to avoid that kind of thing. It's not, you know, it's just like in the workplace. And
you have to think about their perspective of where they're coming from, right? I'm one of those people, like Vivek sometimes says, you're a no person. It's easy for you to say no. And before I even think of the reasoning he's got. And so I've had to kind of like shift my mindset and go, okay, let me hear of your thoughts. I'll listen to it all, I'll process it, and we'll debate it. And we'll see, you know, if it doesn't, we'll try his way or we'll try my way on certain things. And if it works, great, then we've all succeeded, to be honest. But don't get stuck in them for a long time because it's inefficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Valerie says you can have it all, just not all at once.
Yes. Yep, you can have it all not at once. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I think there's a question about mentors.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
How did you find mentors in this? In terms of how do we find our mentors in general, or just on our experience in tackling those disagreements, Christina?
Yeah, basically how to find mentors and how did you approach them? Because I'm assuming they're not going to be on the board, or are they?
They joined the board after.
They did, okay.
Yeah.
But also like in terms of the business side, like where did you find these business people coming from a very academic science world?
Yeah, absolutely. So mentors were my best friends, to be honest, because I learned so much from them. And make sure you have multiple as well, not just one. And you have to make sure these mentors have different areas of expertise. Our mentors, to be honest, became investors that became board members, really. So one of my mentors, I class is like Riham Satti, who's the co-founder of Shazam. So he became a mentor, then from a mentor he became an investor, from there he became a board member. And that's the path, a lot of the routes we took with our mentors. How do we find them? The short answer is actually just networking. But I don't sit there and say to him, can you be my mentor? That's a very awkward conversation to have, to be honest. They're like, I don't know you. Why would I mentor you? The technique I had was I would find someone that I really admired or looked up at, and I would go to events that they were hosting, or I would get an introduction, and I'd have a coffee with them or a chat online, right? And ask them all the advice and questions that I have. I never mention the word mentor or any of that. I just have a conversation with them. And then I'd say to them, would it be okay if I kind of followed up with you in a couple of months, right? And just let you know how we're doing or anything like that. No one's going to say no to that. And so then you do what you say, right? You follow up in a few months and you give them an update, like, hey, we're going to have a catch up. And before you know it, they're doing it every quarter. And then you're like, okay, we should probably just formalize something with this. I was like, would you mind if I call you a mentor? We're catching up every quarter, you know, and I really respect your opinions and you know us, right? Would that be okay? And they're probably like, yeah, no, of course, absolutely. I have never paid any mentors or given them any equity or any of that, right? They kind of respect what we're doing and vice versa. And so it becomes more of kind of informal discussions and chats, really. After that, then you tell them, oh, by the way, we're going to do an investment round. And you've been such a great success to the team. And we've really loved having you on board. Would you be interested in, you know, either investing or taking part in one way or introducing us to investors one way or another? And they'll help, right? They've been helping for months or years, potentially. And so it becomes more of a natural progression, but it doesn't feel forced. It becomes easier to have these conversations over time. And when we, like I said, once we got them on board as investors after, during that time, I said to them, you know, we're going to have to formulate a board around this. And we'd love your opinion, right? And it's not going to be a large commitment, you know, maybe quarterly we'll meet up and would you be interested in joining? And you ask them just honestly there and then, right? But yeah, I never have gone to someone just said, can you be my mentor? I know some people have, but I feel a bit awkward doing that. So I kind of lead it in gently. I'm a bit more subtle with things sometimes.
Yeah. No, I think
Great.
that's a great, I think that's a fantastic strategy. And it is interesting when you have an organization that people believe in because you're doing something impactful. I find that as well. People are really eager to help. And when people offer help, like, you need to believe that they wouldn't say that if they didn't actually want to help you. I mean, I had recently a total crisis on a decision I was trying to make for Breakthrough Labs. And I remembered that I had spoken to this wonderful person that someone introduced me to, and he had said, it's hard to be a solo founder. If you ever want to talk, call me. And I did. I called him, and it was like the best conversation I'd had. He completely helped me.
Oh,
Having
that network of people who just support and believe in you, instrumental. It's the one that kind of gets you off that rut. We're talking about giving up, right? They're the ones who will, like, pull you out of that state, and remotivate you and reignite that energy and remind you why you're doing this, and
absolutely
giving you that mindset and encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we have time for one more question. If somebody has a question for Riham, this has been so useful, Riham. Your story has been really helpful, and the kinds of strategies and tactics that you've taken over the years have I think are really useful to our founders.
Oh, thank you.
Have another question? Go ahead, Rita.
Yeah, I was a bit inspired when you said that your mentor also invested in you. Were they investors, or were they did they own other companies, or?
Some investors, some no investment at all, never done it before. So we were the first ones they invested in. They never even thought they would even be an investor, to be honest, either. So yeah, I think once someone feels invested emotionally or in a kind of a commercial sense, and that they have seen how much you've grown in that journey, it becomes easier to make that decision, really. And so yeah, I guess the kind of message from that is making sure you have regular communication with mentors, networks, giving them updates. All of that really does help when you're doing investment rounds later.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries.
That's great. Anybody else?
Can I just ask, do you have kind of 3 top advice that you would give to startups? Just, the very kind of the most important things that you think would make it a success. Thank you.
Oh, good question. Okay, top 3. Surround yourselves with people who are ahead of the journey, and have gotten through that experience already, right? So if I'm, let's say, Series A, I find people who are in Series C, and I talk to them and I hang out with them and I learn everything I need, because when I get to that journey, I've got some sort of experience. If I'm at seeds, I find people at Series A, right? So make sure you surround with people who've done it one way or another, right? And if it's in a similar, not necessarily space, but industry also, it helps a lot, because they'll tell you like the stuff that I've been sharing plus more on a regular basis. So that's probably my first one. The second one is, sometimes it's easy to kind of think about the risks and what if it fails and all of those situations, right? And it's easy to get down that mindset. I'd say again, making sure you've got those mentors and you've got that network of people who can help in that journey, and a team as well, so that you're not doing everything, really, because it becomes really, really tricky. I think if you've got other people to kind of delegate and work with, building that team really becomes helpful, even when you do investment rounds, because they can help get involved in that journey and pitching and all of that stuff. 2 heads are sometimes better than 1 and stuff like that. The third piece is, if you're, I guess, B2B, and you're going down that route, planning your route to market relative to your competitors is important, because you need a way to differentiate yourself very early on, because that gives you that strategy piece, but it also gives you that North Star to aim from. So, and making sure you account for that. So like I said, building that 5-year plan and working back from it, and makes it easier to imagine and actually execute on it as well. So that'd probably be my last advice, really.
That's a great ending point. Thank you so much,
Great,
Riham.
thank you
No
very much.
worries, no worries. Thanks
Really, really good. This-
for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining. And this will be recorded and we'll put it up on our community as soon as that is up and running. But Riham, I can't thank you enough for your time.
No worries, no worries. Hopefully everyone found it useful.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I think everybody, it looks like, has gotten a lot out of that. So I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Take care, everyone, and join us for our next chat in July. Thank you.
See you soon.
Great, thank you, bye.
Bye.